Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing abrupt climate change, abrupt climate collapse, abrupt environmental destruction, possibly abrupt economic collapse, maybe in the near future. There are so many things going on, so many things converging, coalescing. Obviously, in political news today, we had the embassy being moved to Jerusalem, and many Palestinians were killed and injured, and it looks like an insane, just a mess, a big ass mess over there right now. I'm not really sure what the point of all this is. However, I will say once again, if you check out the QAnon stuff, there actually is some kind of end game or end goal. I'm just going to quickly just, kind of brush on this a little bit. Very quickly, if you want to maybe check out some videos or follow some people who are covering this that are not like that are not all like, I guess more partisan-y to the alt-right. I mean, the people that are following this are basically like, they are Trump supporters for the most part. But there are some that are a little less, like a lot of them are like super Christian or super, they have a lot to say about God. Some are, definitely, they all kind of use the verbiage of, patriots and blah, 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 and all that, which makes it a little difficult to get through the information. Sorry, trying to keep my train of thought. So, what was I saying? But there is one particular channel that covers this as very partisan-y in any way. It just covers the information, period, to the point. So if you are interested in somebody covering this information without all the jargon and the mumbo jumbo, hit me up, send me an email. I will send you a link. Anyways, what I was trying to say is this, that according to this person who is, military intelligence, basically, like there is a whole, basically they're taking, there's like a CIA / globalist network of people that are basically running this whole like money scam on multiple governments around the world. And they were in control of North Korea. They took them out. That's why North Korea is seeking peace. They were in control of Iran. They are taking them out. That's why they're getting out of the Iran deal, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to like basically, try and take out all this stuff that's going on. This is the story that they are talking about. And in this story, they have said multiple times, Israel is last, meaning they are going to do something with Israel. Basically, they're going to, I think they're talking about maybe denuclearizing Israel and basically taking out deep state elements that are controlling Israel. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like in the end. But so, if you actually follow this stuff and listen to it, basically everything that you're hearing on the mainstream media is all a slanted reaction to, just kind of, they don't understand what's going on. And because they don't want you to listen to QAnon, or they don't want people to follow QAnon, and they don't want people to pay attention to what's going on because they're actually trying to thwart what's going on. There's just basically this huge information war. So everything you're getting from the mainstream media is slanted in this one direction of like, Trump is insane and he doesn't, whatever. He's just a complete lunatic, which, all evidence points to that truth. But you have to actually like suspend all that belief and all that mainstream narrative in order to actually contemplate the idea that maybe somebody else is controlling things behind the scenes, behind Trump, and they have a whole other agenda than the mainstream media is willing to acknowledge or admit to. So, you know, while I totally like, you know, it's total bullshit that Israel is just massacring Palestinians. That is something that I never, ever want to see happening, and never, ever support on any level. Even though all that is going on, apparently, according to this source, there is something totally different going on than anybody is getting any news about. But if you really want the news about it, you should actually follow what's going on to get an alternative viewpoint of the underlying cause and effect that's happening in the political world, if you're interested in that. That's all I have to say about that. I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to go back to some climate change news. So yesterday I was talking about the effects of climate change on health, and possibly UV effects on health, and a good follower, Jeff, you know, did some work for me, and used Google for me the way I should have used Google before I actually. I was just kind of like coming off the top of my head about, you know, things that I've been kind of like wondering about as I'm going about my day. But he found a couple of good little summations of some abstracts, some articles, some studies is what I'm trying to say. First one is climate change, ozone depletion, and the impact on ultraviolet exposure of human skin. This is all the way back from 2003. Abstract. For 30 years, there has been concern that anthropogenic damage to the Earth's stratospheric ozone layer will lead to an increase of solar ultraviolet radiation reaching the Earth's surface, with a consequent adverse impact on human health, especially the skin. More recently, there has been increased awareness of the interactions between ozone depletion and climate change, global warming, which could also impact on human exposure to terrestrial UV. The most serious effect of changing UV exposure of human skin is the potential rise in incidence of skin cancers. Risk estimates of this disease associated with ozone depletion suggest that an additional peak incidence of 5,000 cases of skin cancer per year in the UK would occur around the mid part of the century. Climate change, which is predicted to lead to an increased frequency of extreme temperature events and high summer temperatures, will become more frequent in the UK, which I guess is where this is based. This could impact on human UV exposure by encouraging people to spend more time in the sun. Whilst future social trends remain uncertain, it is likely that over the century, behavior associated with climate change rather than ozone depletion will be the largest determinant of sun exposure and consequent impact on skin cancer of the UK population. I mean, they're talking about skin cancer, but also UV. Some forms of UV actually penetrate the skin and go deeper, and I'm concerned about those kinds of UV. Didn't I read something about UV affecting, UV radiation affecting DNA, or you know what I'm saying? Because radiation affects us on a molecular level. Here's another one. This is from, when is this from? May 2000. Wow, going back. Is there a title to this? The effects of changing weather on public health. Abstract. Many diseases are influenced by weather conditions or display strong seasonality suggestive of a possible climatic contribution. Projections of future climate change have therefore compelled health scientists to re-examine weather-disease relationships. There are three projected physical consequences of climate change: temperature rise, sea level rise, and extremes in the hydrologic cycle. This century, the Earth has warmed by about 0.5 degrees centigrade. In the mid-range, estimates of future temperature change and sea level rise are 2 degrees centigrade and 49 centimeters, respectively. By the year 2100, extreme weather variability associated with climate change may especially add an important new stress to developing nations that are already vulnerable as a result of environmental degradation, resource depletion, overpopulation, or location. The regional impacts of climate change will vary widely depending on existing population vulnerability. Health outcomes of climate change can be grouped to those of direct physical consequences: heat, mortality, or drowning; physical, chemical sequelae. I am not familiar with that word, sequelae. Sequelae, atmospheric transport, and formation of air pollutants; physical, biological consequences, response of vector and waterborne diseases and food production; and socio-demographic impacts, climate or environmentally induced migration or population dislocation. Better understanding of the linkages between climate variability as a determinant of disease will be important, among other key factors, in constructing predictive models to guide public health prevention. All right, so I'm going to link both of those below if you want to go into more in-depth analysis. I will not at this very moment. I just kind of wanted to read an overview of those, and if you guys want to get into some other reading. Sequela, a condition that is a consequence of a previous disease or injury. The long-term sequelae of infection. All right, brand new words. Lastly, I don't know how I missed this. Oh, I think it's like a interview with Dahr Jamail from Truth Out. Billions of people will be displaced by sea level rise. And it starts out, this is between, I'm going to link this below so y'all can listen to it. I'm sure probably many of you have already heard it. Janine Jackson, Antarctic glaciers are melting at dramatic rates. Scientists are finding Antarctica is, of course, a continent of ice, roughly twice the size of Australia. The retreat of its oceanfront glaciers raises serious concerns about the resulting rise in sea levels. The most severe projections of potential impact are almost impossible to grasp. Billions of people displaced, coastal cities disappeared. So she goes on to interview Dahr. So there's more than one piece of relevant work here, of course. What is the research that you'd like to spotlight? And can you tell us in layperson's terms what this new research seems to show? The most important study recently regarding the Antarctic and sea level rise was published in Science Advances on the 18th of this month. And the title of the study is "Freshening by Glacial Meltwater Enhances Melting of Ice Shelves and Reduces Formation of Antarctic Bottom. Water freshening by glacier meltwater enhances melting of ice shelves and reduces formation of Antarctic bottom water." Ooh. So what this essentially means is that even in the eastern Antarctic, there are glaciers that are melting that are actually freshening the ocean around them. So the fresh water of the ice melts, flows into the oceans, and then that is in turn blocking a process that normally cold, salty ocean water is dense and heavy and sinks down to the bottom, where it forms what is known as the densest water on Earth because it's the coldest and the saltiest. And so what's happening is that the bottom water is stopping being formed. because of the melting of these coastal glaciers in two places of Antarctica, off the western Antarctic coast, as well as the Totten Glacier, which is in eastern Antarctica. And so these are the two fastest melting regions of the ice continent. So what this is causing, according to this study, is that the cold surface water is no longer making its way all the way down into the depths. So it's not forming that deeper layer of water that can travel across areas where it normally would. And so what this essentially means is that these two regions of Antarctica's glaciers are now in a feedback loop where they are melting. It's causing this effect on the oceans, and then that's causing even more melting. And so this is worrisome for numerous reasons. One, that for a long time, scientists believed that Antarctica, being the ice continent, would either not be dramatically impacted by human-caused climate disruption, or at least minimally. But now, what this means is that at least 10% of Antarctica's coastal glaciers are now in full retreat, and because of this feedback loop, that retreat's only going to speed up. And ultimately, this feedback loop will start happening on other glaciers in Antarctica as well. And so for sea level rise, we already know that the Arctic sea ice is dramatically melting, which is going to only intensify the melt rate in the Arctic. Of course, Greenland, we know, is melting at record rates as well. And so now with Antarctica, save dramatic changes in mitigation and fossil fuel CO2 emissions across the planet on a very, very abrupt timescale. Right now, at current trajectories, we are on course at a minimum to hit the worst case projections of sea level rise, which according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is 8.5 feet by 2100. That's a lot of feet. But these worst case projections, unfortunately, keep being upgraded every time more and more reports like the one we're discussing today are being released. Indeed, they do. Just one moment. All right, where were we? In terms of attention to what is obviously, this is the interviewer, Janice, what is almost a staggeringly important development. The New York Times had a big 3-part photo piece last May with really spectacular images of Antarctica and a kind of virtual reality thing. At one point, the piece said if the sea level rise turns out to be as rapid as the worst case projections, it could lead to a catastrophe without parallel in the history of civilization. And then, since then, that's May of 2017, well, the Times hasn't really gone back to the story. Their recent Antarctica stories have been about penguins, you know. I just don't know what the attention is commensurate, and there's that the attention is commensurate, and there's all kinds of reasons for that. And I'm going to ask you, but I just want to throw in, there's amount of coverage, and then I want to say a little thing about the tone of coverage, because within the same New York Times piece, in the part 1 of it, it was 3 parts. It noted that US and British scientists were working to get better measurements in the main trouble spots. And then it added, the effort could cost more than $25 million and might not produce clearer answers about the fate of the ice until the early 2020s. And the next sentence is, for scientists working in Antarctica, the situation has become a race against time. Well, surely part of the reason we aren't running as fast as we might is the amount of coverage or lack of it. And then this tone that, oh, it's expensive. I just wonder what you make in general on this issue, in particular, the way media are covering it. Dahr says, it is really shocking to me, and I think you really hit the nail on the head when you discuss the fact of the gravity of this crisis and the implications of this on the entirety of human civilization on the planet, not even to talk about the other species. And one would think that would demand a level of coverage, excuse me, would demand a level of coverage that would be path-breaking, urgent, and backed up by citing all the scientific data that's being released at a fairly rapid pace right now. Whether it's sea level rise, temperature increase projections, what's happening to methane in the Arctic, et cetera, et cetera. For example, I would add another quote by Dr. Eric Renaud, a glaciologist with UC Irvine and NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab back in 2014, who said, today we present observational evidence. We're not talking about projections. Observational evidence that a large sector of the West Antarctic ice sheet has gone into irreversible retreat. It has passed the point of no return. That was 4 years ago. So the urgency is clear. Sea level rise projections are being increased dramatically. We are talking in the longer run, billions of people being displaced by sea level rise. Entire megacities on the coast, like New York and Tokyo, that are going to have to be relocated entirely or completely abandoned to the sea. And so with that being the context, the reportage of, oh, okay, well, at least we're giving the denialist coverage. We need to be reporting on specifically what is happening, what the projections are, and what this means. Because pretending, oh, it's not that bad, or we're still going to be able to mitigate it to the point where we're not going to have to relocate much of New York City, for example. It's just not honest coverage. And he pointed out exactly the thing that I was thinking when I was reading this. And the thing that I wanted to say is that for all you denialists out there, the conspiracy is not climate change. The conspiracy is that they're not telling you how bad it is. That's the conspiracy. If you want to get all like, they're running a game on us and they're lying to us. If you really want to go down that road, because I'm sure you do, the road is, the road is, the message is, the reality is that they're not telling us how bad it is. They're hiding it from us. We're screwed, and we're not being told that we're screwed. That's the conspiracy. If you really want to get into a conspiracy, go with that one. And the idea it could cost more than $25 million. This particular project, $25 million, is a pittance. They could have easily said it would cost as little as $25 million. The idea that we should be thinking, what I was just reading something about, we give Israel $10 million a day. A day. And we can't find $25 million for this. Rather than putting in blah, 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 or put it in the context of $25 million for more studies, compared to the Pentagon budget, which is roughly between $700 and $800 billion that we know of. Not even talking about the black budget, which puts it up at well over $1 trillion annually. So if we need 25 million or 50 million, or, heaven forbid, $1 billion for some more scientific studies, not even talking about mitigation or starting a planned relocation of people and transfer of infrastructure, that conversation is not happening is just mind-boggling to me. Because the reality is, for example, the U.S. military in their Quadrennial Defense Review report, they are already acutely aware of this. They know that at least half of their naval bases, their bigger naval bases in the U.S. on the coast, have to be relocated. They're watching the water come up to the docks and start to inundate infrastructure. So they're acutely aware of this. And yet the coverage, as you just cited, in the New York Times, is not even coming close to keeping up with that. Again, climate denialists, people that want to come on this channel and talk about polar pole shifts and grand solar minimums. They're not making this up. The army is not making this up. It is absolutely happening, and you just can't be like, no, it's not. Because boobity bop, adapt 2030, stupid ass, whatever YouTube channel said it's, they're lying to you. Get it together, guys. I know some of y'all think that this is a waste of breath or a waste of time for me to get upset about this or to keep talking to the denialists about this, but I'm just trying to let them know, because they're here and they're watching the channel. So what you don't get to do is get away with just like coming in and, spewing a bunch of like useless garbage on my comment wall, and not get talked to, and not get shown evidence. That's what the point of this channel is, to show you evidence day after day after day after day. So, if you're coming here and you want to spew the rhetoric that you find on other denialist sites or the grand solar minimum bobbity boo-bah, that's not real. That's not happening. Come over here and hang out with us and just watch for a while and don't comment. Just chill out. Take in some information. It's totally fine. Also, you don't have enough evidence. Don't talk to me about the Danish Meteorological Institute. That's some cherry-picked junk. Or put it in the context of, let me see, because the reality, for example, I just read this. So that's the end of it. I think that was very short. I thought I was going to be reading for a lot longer. But he obviously has some key things to say, as Dahr Jamail usually does. Also, happening in other huge news, rather large, is, you know, Hawaii has a volcano erupting. And it's causing quite a lot of havoc. And obviously has, you know, direct local consequences, as well as possibly geologic consequences. A total of 19 fissures have opened near the Big Island's Kilauea volcano, and more residents were chased from their homes. Sorry, I had a little break there in my Wi-Fi connection. Just completely went south on me all of a sudden, and then it took me a long time to get back. So continuing with this article, lava has destroyed 37 structures, 28 of which were homes. According to officials, the 17th fissure stretched hundreds of yards in length near Kamahina Loop Road, the Honolulu Star Advertiser said, with cracks forming in Highway 132, which has been used for evacuating hundreds of, sorry, this article is jumping around. Hundreds of residents, officials worry that an additional fissure could shut down the roadway. In the military, we would like to have two ways to exit out of a dangerous situation. Major General Jeff Hickman, public affairs officer with the Hawaii National Guard, told Hawaii News Now, if that road does get cut off, we do start to plan for a mass evacuation. It is a dangerous situation. We're trying to plan for the worst. Okay, obviously, crazy stuff happening in Hawaii. I don't know if that's climate change related. Some people think it is. It's just something that's happening, and it's in the environment, and it's related to the whole of the situation. So while I was fiddling with the Wi-Fi, I found one more thing, something about UV, just an article that looked kind of interesting. I don't know how far in I'm going to get with this. I am trying to actually end this video. It seems to be long in the tooth at this point, but Peru tries to adapt to dangerous levels of UV radiation brought on by climate change. This is from 2016, March 15th. The brisk March morning air is a shock after the tourists have recently regretfully unpacked themselves from the cozy alpaca wool blankets of climate-controlled buses. Watching them is Natividad Sonjo, who has been selling blankets, painted stones, and carved bamboo instruments for 15 years on the eastern edge of Sacsayhuaman, an archaeological complex of enormous stone walls and wide lawns just north of Cusco, Peru, the seat of the great Inca Empire. The diffuse sunlight of a cloudy morning high in the Andes softly illuminates the city. And then, all at once, the sun breaks through, bringing with it a wallop of heat. Hey, that sounds like Los Angeles. Soon, excuse me, any memory of the cool air has evaporated along with the clouds. But Sonjo doesn't remove the elaborately embroidered wool jacket she put on first thing that morning. The sun used to warm us, she says, repeating a common refrain among inhabitants of the Peruvian Altiplano. Now it burns us. The sun has always been strong in Cusco. The city's proximity to the equator and its altitude, some 11,150 feet above sea level, mean that come summer in the southern hemisphere, sunlight doesn't have to travel far to reach Cusco. It also doesn't encounter much interference along the way. Not a good state of affairs for those who live here. The amount of ultraviolet radiation that makes it to Earth is limited by the atmospheric ozone, a molecule made up of 3 oxygen atoms bound together. At higher altitudes, there are fewer ozone molecules between the Earth and the sun, making UV readings normally elevated in mountainous regions near the equator. In 2006, climate researchers found Cusco and the surrounding areas to have the highest UV readings in the world. But now, as climate scientists say the planet is reaching critical temperatures worldwide, Peruvian meteorologists are recording record levels of UV radiation throughout the country, while meteorologists in Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia are recording similarly increased levels in regions close to Peru. The effects of prolonged exposure to ultraviolet radiation can be calamitous. The risk of developing skin cancer doubles after only a few acute exposures, say dermatological researchers, while repeated exposure can cause cataracts and permanent eye damage. The planet is affected too. Increased UV can limit photosynthesis in crops, raise the temperature of the uppermost layer of the ocean, killing off phytoplankton that are key source of nutrition in the ocean's food chain. As the Peruvian Meteorological Agency's chief UV researcher, Orlando Cora, is responsible for collecting the data from a network of 9 spectrophotometers dotted throughout the country's varied landscape. The data shows that cities up and down Peru's Pacific coast, including Lima, the capital, have regularly recorded daily UV index readings of over 14 during the past 2 months. Holy mess, that's high. While in the southern Andes region, 1 in every 4 days has had a reading of 16. For comparison, the highest UV reading in Miami last year was roughly 12.5. The World Health Organization regards any reading over 11 as extreme. Wow. In January, Cora's team recorded an average of UV index reading of 13.6 for Cusco, the highest average monthly reading since they began collecting data in 2009. So there you go. This is 2 years ago. Well, there's more to read here. Scientists have been concerned about serious reductions in ozone since at least in the 1970s, said Paul Newman, chief scientist for atmospheric sciences at NASA. He explains that man-made chemicals like fluorocarbons, which were used in refrigerants, propellants, and aerosols from the 1970s into the early 2000s, collect over Antarctica during the northern hemisphere summer months. Then when the southern hemisphere begins to warm in August, the CFCs get activated by sunlight and start to destroy the ozone molecules that trap and deflect enough UV radiation to allow life to grow on Earth. By November, that depleted ozone air spreads out through the southern hemisphere. Think about looking down on a bucket of white paint, says Newman. If you put a dollop of red paint right at the center of that bucket, start stirring the whole paint bucket turns pink. That is the depleted region. As you mix it into the mid-latitudes lowers ozone everywhere. And this last year, there was a pretty big ozone hole. It persisted for a long time. NASA data shows that the greatest ozone depleted area in the world, besides the one over Antarctica, runs along the Peruvian Andes from Ecuador into Chile and Bolivia. So indeed, people are being affected. I was going to say infected, affected by UV, extreme UV. It's obviously happening. I mean, this is exactly what it feels like in Los Angeles when the clouds part. If there's sun, and that's why they are. I'm pretty damn sure why they're making clouds on sunny, clear days. I'm in the last part of having a cold, where you're just hacking and coughing for the last day or two. Woo. Anyways, sorry to put you all through that. What I was trying to say was, yes, in Los Angeles, the clouds part on sunny, clear days. It is hot as hell very, very quickly. I mean, it heats up real fast. If there are no clouds in the sky and the sun is out, it is getting to 80 super quick on any given day, 85, sometimes in the 90s. And we're talking about just winter and spring. So who knows what this summer will bring, at least in the Los Angeles area. Obviously, everywhere else, as soon as I was talking about the temperature flip-flops yesterday, a bunch of people commented saying that the Midwest, places in the Midwest had shot up to like in the 90s, mid-90s over the last couple days. Just like a real quick spike, right? You know, real quick up into very high temperatures and then went back down again. So everyone is getting extreme weather flip-flops, extreme weather weirdings. So buckle up, y'all. It's only May. So we got a couple of months ahead of us, and who knows what that will bring. Obviously, there are lots of factors and forces, lots of things happening. Obviously, we're getting methane releases. Obviously, we're getting higher water vapor concentrations in the air. Things are evolving on a much faster timeline. So who knows how fast that timeline is going to occur. That's all I have for you tonight. I'm sorry this video was a little bit disjointed and hopefully not too long and hopefully informational. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. Until next time, peace.